From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Welcome to another edition of Chicago Newsroom here on Can TV. I'm Ken Davis, and it's been an eventful week, but I must say less so than a lot of weeks we've had around here lately. So it gives us a chance to kind of pull back, look at some of the big stories and see what's going on. And for me to make a big announcement today that I haven't had a chance to talk this over with the bosses here at Can TV, but I think we're going to expand Can TV and open a gun range here because it's a good opportunity to raise a little bit of money for the company, you know. We got a nice big studio, and when they're not using it, we just, you know, well, anyway, but that's not official yet. Hello to you all, and hello to our guest, Charlie Meyerson, joining us today. Charlie Meyerson, independent journalist for a while anyway.
Between gigs.
Recently with the Chicago Tribune, before that. Oh my God, WNUA, WXRT, lots of, a true veteran of Chicago radio broadcasting newspapers.
With the scars.
And yes, you can tell a veteran by the arrows in his back. Also joining us today, Art Golab from the Chicago Sun-Times. Really happy to have you on the show for the first time. Art is a database reporter, right, for the Sun-Times? You do research kind of stuff.
Right, I crunch numbers like school tests, census numbers, things like that.
And you've got lots of wisdom to impart to us today, so I'm happy to have you here with us too. Ethan Michaeli joining us from We the People Media, publisher of the Residents Journal, which is something that I'm particularly admiring of. I think it's a wonderful idea, the idea of giving voice to public housing residents, having them publish their own newspaper, tell their own stories, and you guys have been in the trenches for a long time. I'm glad to have you on the show for the first time.
Thanks, Ken.
So we've got the Chicago Public Schools facing the prospect of having to lay off more teachers in order to hire cops to keep an eye on the high schools, or maybe $100 million more in taxes for them. Maybe they're going to be the first one to run to the well. We have our police superintendent, lots of stories going on with him. We got all kinds of issues going on with Lakeview, with mobbing scenes and stabbings and God knows what else. So where do you want to start? Charlie, I turn to you. What do you think is the biggest story going on right now, or the most interesting story going on?
I think the most interesting story of the week is one you haven't mentioned, which is a Taste of Chicago. Diminished attendance, vendors complaining about revenue. You know, it's a quality of life issue that helps shape Chicago's image to the world and certainly to the greater Chicago area. And I think it's an interesting situation the city's in as they decide, you know, whether these diminished numbers make a stronger case to go private with management next year, or put some more tax dollars in the kitty.
You know, when I read the stories in the papers yesterday and this morning about the diminished attendance, the biggest shock to me was that there were something like 2.1 or 2.2 million or something people who did attend Taste of Chicago this year. I have a distinction for various professional reasons that I've worked over the years that I'm one of the few living Americans who has been to each and every single one of those things. Not proud of it, but I have. And I got to tell you that I went this year just, you know, because it was interesting. I wanted to go see what it was like.
There's lots of food there.
There's lots of food, but my God, I just couldn't believe anybody would be there. I mean, I got there at 7:30, and I heard a series of public address announcements every 5 minutes saying, we're about to stop selling food, we're about to stop selling tickets. Right. It's about time for you to leave. Shouldn't you be thinking about going home? And it just seemed to me like all they wanted was, the objective was to get everybody out of there. And of course they did. So.
Well, I was there roughly the same time, a couple of days in a row, actually, a little bit earlier. But yeah, I heard those announcements. And you know, they probably did overdo that a little bit. But you know, I think the fact that it is still a huge event, and maybe not as big as it was, gives the city, you know, something to work with. It's the kind of event with the kind of attendance that many municipality, many commercial venue would let's not say kill for, but
well, that's actually a very good
what can
point.
the city do to build on that?
There's just an amazing amount of a pile of money to be had there if it's
I mean, do they have any choice but to go private at this point? If the vendors aren't making money, they'll stop coming. And there have been a diminished number of vendors, as I understand it, over the years. The city's got to start thinking about doing something like charging admission or that.
I haven't seen it. I saw a couple of vendors complaining that they didn't make as much money. I'm not sure that I've seen anybody say they lost money, although Charlie Robinson, wonderful vendor of wonderful ribs, seems to be saying that, you know, he was worried he might lose money.
Right. But it was a very different vibe this year, very different ambience without the big music stuff going on and all that.
So I thought it was wonderfully pleasant. You know, there's a great variety of food, as always. You know, we got our food, we walked over and ate it by Buckingham Fountain. It's still a great event in a lot of ways. So, you know, well, I hope they save it.
I'm sure that, as Ethan says, one way or another it's going to get saved because it has the potential for somebody to make a lot of money. So somebody probably will. All right, let's turn to you. This story, I believe it first appeared in your august newspaper, the Pulitzer Prize winning Chicago Sun-Times. How does this work? The schools were getting these 2 cops in every high school for a long time, but they weren't really paying the actual value.
Well, it's interesting. They were getting a bargain. I think we were paying like $8 million a year for these police, and they're saying the actual cost was closer to 25. So they decided this year that they discovered this underpayment or underpayment, and decided to make the school system pay the police department $70 million all at once to make up for these years of underpayments. So, and as it happens, that's just about the amount of money that they're going to save by not paying the teachers their raise. So, you know, some cynical people might say that it's a way of helping to balance the city budget on the backs of the teachers.
That would be a windfall for the police department suddenly to get this $70 million.
Well, they're going to get it.
This is an old game from the police department. They've been squeezing the Chicago Housing Authority for the past, since the plan for transformation began, so over a decade, for $13 million a year from the Housing Authority's budget to do extra patrols within the CHA. Now this is, to put it politely, a lark, because there's really, anyone who spent time in the CHA back when there really was a large number of public housing developments knows that the housing authority was not well secured, that the police did not do walkdowns, that the police did not do anything like the extra patrols that they were contracted to do. In my opinion, it was just a political payoff, really, from one agency to another to kind of keep a good relationship with City Hall. Well,
Art, you're a researcher, you're a numbers guy, and I got to tell you that I thought the numbers were kind of interesting. There are, if I'm not mistaken, there's 100 high schools that each have two police officers. So that's 200 police officers, and to staff 200 police officers a year is $70 million.
Well, no,
these police officers
actually they claim $25 million. Is the actual cost.
Okay, all
and
right.
the city's only been paying $8 million.
I see.
So the city's only been paying a third of the cost. Yeah, the $70 million would be that $25 million plus the years of back pay. And they're not putting them on a payment plan. They're saying, pay us now, all at once. The problem with that is it's similar to the CHA in that some principals say that the police aren't actually out there in the hallways doing what they think they should be doing. And there's no doubt that the high schools need police. And that just a policeman standing in the hall, even if he's just reading a newspaper, can have an amazing calming effect on a rowdy bunch of kids. And the principals know that and they appreciate it. The problem is they're not always out there interacting with the kids. Outside of the dismissal time, which is the most dangerous period of the day, a lot of the cops spend the whole day holed up in their office. And they're playing solitaire on their computers, they're doing reports, and who knows what they're doing in there, but the principals don't like that. On the other hand, they say they've got cops who go out there and interact with the kids and are a presence and a deterrence. So the cops' attitude for some of them is this. They're saying, we're police officers. We're not there to babysit the kids. If they do something illegal, I'll come out of my office and I'll arrest them. You know, other than that, I don't want to be out there
I'm not a social
talking to kids
worker.
all day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So here you have two different attitudes, and I think that somewhere they've got to find a happy medium. They've got to. It would be nice. The principals would like to have some kind of protocol where there's a mandate for cops to go out and do a certain amount of interacting with the kids, just as a form of deterrence. And maybe if they did that, they wouldn't need 2 police officers in every school, and maybe they'd be able to save some money.
That's one of the things. I mean, we all been around Chicago a long time. We know that the difference between high school number 1 and high school number 100 is pretty dramatic. And for every high school that needs 12 cops, there are a bunch of high schools that probably don't need any at all. But I guess that's too politically sensitive to try to figure out what schools would get what. Right?
Well, it's analogous to the same situation, the same disputes, debates that are breaking out in various neighborhoods around Chicago. Does every neighborhood need an equal amount of policing, or do you deploy the police to the trouble spots?
Right. And that becomes immediately political because you got 50 aldermen who all want everything for their.
Well, speaking of that, you've got Alderman Tunney who wants to increase police patrols in Boys Town.
Exactly.
Because of that videotaped incident. And you know, I've actually run the numbers on that, and crime is up there, 17%. That's a significant amount. And the troubling thing, all crime. If you look at all the crime for May and June last year compared to May and June this year, it's up 17%. But the more troubling part is that if you look at the more serious crime, like assaults and batteries, those are the ones that are up the most.
Wow.
But the levels are relative. I mean, it's a big percentage increase, but the numbers are small compared to other neighborhoods around the city.
You've got, I was looking at 2 precincts that cover Boys Town. The one precinct in Roseland, where the little 9-year-old boy was shot the other night, that one precinct has 3 times as much crime per capita, 3 or 4 times as much time per capita as Boys Town. And it's going to be a hard sell saying, okay, let's take some cops out of Roseland and send them up to Boys Town.
Right. Well, that is one of the political hot potatoes that Rahm Emanuel inherited, and it's going to be very interesting to see how he's able to walk through this because, as you've pointed out, everybody needs more police protection or perceives that they need more police protection, and at the same time, you're taking police from one place and putting them to the other. I just don't really quite understand where this is all going to go. I mean, where he's going to find 1,000 new police officers, where the money's going to come from that. It's all a great mystery to me. And to everyone else at the time.
I think technology is going to come into play here. We have the video of the Boys Town beating, which I have to presume provides plenty of evidence, or at least lots of leads for police in following things up. And as the city begins to increase its camera network presence around the city, I think there are lots of ways that you can leverage technology. I mean, a number of departments around the country have done this to become more efficient in law enforcement.
Jody Weiss wanted to do that by having these roving patrols going around to cover the hot spots. But the new superintendent seems to have a different philosophy, that he wants to increase just the numbers of police spread out all over the place. But again, how is he going to do that? He hasn't really explained that.
Yeah. Well, one way he's going to build the Chicago school system and get some money from them. So, a coalition of the billing.
I mean, policing is an issue that really requires a lot of thought as to what strategy is going to be effective, right? You look at a community like Roseland, the source of the problem in terms of the violence is drug dealing, and a lot of the drug dealing is done to people who aren't from Roseland. People are coming in from outside of the neighborhood to buy drugs. That's creating a market for drugs in the neighborhood. And then you've got people stepping up to supply. Whenever you've got that situation, you're going to have violence. I mean, violence is inevitable because it's not it's an unregulated market. It's if we're both drug dealers, just for sake of argument,
just for sake of argument, and you rip me off, I can't take you to court to get my money back. So the only way to do that is to get it out of you with violence. That's going to continue, in my opinion, to be a problem until we kind of deal with the national reality of what is really going on in this And some
society.
of that discussion is beginning to happen. I mean,
I think
Tony
so.
Preckwinkle, no less than head of the Cook County has been raising that issue about what
And Sheriff Tom Dart.
And Sheriff Tom Dart.
In tune with that too.
Right, and you know, there was a fascinating piece that just came out this morning in the Reader. Again, that sort of thing about you know, everybody in Chicago smoking marijuana, but if you get put in jail for it, there's a good chance we know what color you are. And that raises the issue of how you deal with the populations that are in prison, the cost of the population in prison, and all of that. A question for you. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the war on drugs has been going on for decades at this point, and it's wreaking havoc in every major city in the United States, in many small towns in the United States, and you know, now in the country of Mexico is a war zone because of our consumption of illegal drugs.
Yeah. Eitan, I wanted to turn to you a little bit to talk, to sort of turn the focus for a moment on the CHA, because I think you know a lot about this. The CHA, or the Mayor Emanuel just appointed 3 new members to the CHA board yesterday, and there's been a pretty thorough shakeup of the top echelon of the CHA. Did it need it? Was it something? When the mayor came in, and it appears, now of course we don't know this, but the perception is that the mayor came in and pretty much just swept out the CHA and you know, started with they're looking for a new CEO and everything else. Was that something that was necessary?
Well, he's replaced Louis Jordan, the CEO of the Housing Authority. The top staff is still in place. In terms of the board, he appointed 3 people who have a relatively low public profile and aren't known to residents or to, you know, the public housing community, as it were. These aren't players in the public housing world.
So it's not parallel to what happened with the CPS board, where they brought in very big high rollers to.
That's right.
It's not like that. I
think what's been going on is that for Mayor Emanuel, this is a lose-lose situation, right? He can't do anything in the CHA without irritating an important constituency, which are the African Americans in the city. That's a real danger. And on the other hand, if he does something positive for public housing residents, that will be perceived as a negative in much of the middle class part of the city. So my impression was that he wanted to put it on the shelf. He didn't want to deal with it. He did not immediately replace Louis Jordan. That was not done along with all the other changes that he was making in City Hall. In the various city departments. He was, I think, not interested in pursuing the CHA, but Louis Jordan forced his hand by irritating the residents greatly with an effort to drug test every single residence, including senior citizens in the 10,000 senior units that are in the city, and also by this kind of bad use of city credit cards to pay for meals at Gold Coast restaurants and red light tickets and other kinds of things that I think, let's say in the last administration, might have passed because they weren't illegal and they weren't the worst things that city officials did. But in Mayor Emanuel's administration, he's looking for a kind of leaner, cleaner government than what was there before.
I had the impression, and you know, this is just one guy's opinion. This is not based on anything, and I'm probably totally wrong. But I just got the impression that credit card micro scandal was something that was just kind of brewed up because the mayor just kind of wanted an easy way to ease him out, that he didn't want him in there.
It was BGA's investigation. They, I don't think City Hall was happy with it. You know, I've covered CHA, as you mentioned, you know, since the Vince Lane days, and this is a much more competent, much more transparent public housing authority than we've ever had. That said, it's still kind of an automated public housing agency in the sense that they're tearing down housing even in a very different housing environment in the city. And I don't think that Louis Jordan, just to be frank, had the creativity or the vision to really adapt what the housing authority was doing to changing circumstances.
See, now that's the first time at this table that we've had somebody actually kind of lay that out that way, and I appreciate that, because again, the perception based on absolutely no data of any kind is that he was a fairly competent administrator that had a pretty good record. But as you say, he was really ticking off a lot of people with that drug testing policy.
There was that, but there's also an issue like, look at Lathrop Homes, right? Lathrop Homes on Diversey and Damon. This is a
prime real estate.
Yeah,
prime real
just
estate.
kind of sitting there.
And it's a situation where there is no money in the market right now to do for sale housing. So the housing authority's traditional third model, which is a third, they'll rebuild these housing authorities, these developments with a third public housing folks, a third market rate rentals, and a third for sale. Well, the last 2/3 of what I just mentioned are housing market dependent. So you can't do those other 2/3. On the other hand, there is money out there to build housing for people that need it, for low-income folks.
And God knows there are plenty of them.
That's right. There was, the Housing Authority opened up their waiting list last year. 200,000 families signed up for the waiting list.
Not to mention all the people who've been displaced who haven't yet been given the unit that they were promised in the plan for transformation. That still hasn't been completely fulfilled.
That's right. Although most of those folks do have a Section 8 or a housing choice voucher to rent in the private market.
So there was just need for some new thinking.
Well, I think there's a need for new thinking. I don't think that the mayor wanted to engage this issue at all. I still, from what I see, I don't see that he's engaged with it yet. I still don't see a strategy coming to the fore. I'm waiting.
Yeah. Interestingly, one of these things that kind of completely got by me was LeClaire Courts, which I guess has been leveled. I just drove by it the other day and it's gone. Now, it was only a few years ago when I was a working reporter that everybody was talking about this being this national model of tenant managed housing, right? This was supposed to be one of the great examples of how to transform public housing. We transformed it, all right. It's just a big lawn right now.
It's very hard for me to understand why, again, in a very different housing market than what we had a few years ago, why they're tearing down units that could easily be filled with people that are from, let's say, a different demographic than what is traditionally been.
And it's important to say that just using the LeClaire example, this was not some smoldering high-rise. This was low-rise,
on the southwest side.
Quality, on the southwest side, where obviously that was needed. So, okay. That's where we're at with the CHA. Let's talk about McCarthy. We have a couple of minutes left here. Our new police superintendent. And this is a little bit difficult without actually watching this video, but I recommend it. It's on YouTube. You can easily find it. He appeared at St. Sabina and made some, what would you call them? Very
conspiratorial,
emotional,
and emotional statements. Yeah.
I mean, what was his message? What was he trying to say?
And so you ask me this question first.
Yeah.
Well, I think the broad outlines, and Eric Zorn has written extensively about this on his blog, Change of Subject, which is another way to find it on Google, is suggesting that the gun laws in this country have the effect of, and he even seemed to be saying, were designed with the intent of creating an environment that drives guns into the minority communities of this country, that makes it easy, that enhances the flow of firearms into the poorest communities.
Similar to Jim Crow laws. I mean, he was saying first you have Jim Crow laws and all that, and then you get the we should say the anti-gun laws is what he's talking about.
Yes, that's right.
So.
You want me to translate?
Yes,
he didn't quite spell. He connect all the dots.
You have a perception in the white part of the city, the white half of Chicago, that there are African American teenagers rampaging downtown and rampaging on the beach and causing trouble.
All of them armed.
All of them armed. All of them, in a kind of barbaric state. And within the African American community, this perception is irritating and is false from their point of view, and probably from the point of view of looking at the actual numbers. Art probably has a better sense of the figures. But so Gary McCarthy has got to how do I put it, like mollify the African-American community on the one hand and still do his job of policing the city on the other. So he's got to kind of build a constituency within the African-American community, otherwise his job will be impossible.
Well, going to St. Sabina was a good place to begin that. And it's interesting to me that this guy seems willing to get out there on the extremely high wire and walk the wire, because, I mean, he actually kind of implicitly criticized Daley a while ago, saying, you know, this fetish we have for anti-gun laws is not working, and we have to find some middle ground, whatever. Where is there a middle ground between not allowing guns and allowing guns? I don't know.
Let's say of all the people who Mayor Rahm Emanuel has installed to head departments, McCarthy is the one with the loosest tongue. He will talk to the media more than just about anyone.
Is that right?
I found him very accessible, you know, willing to sit down on the spur of the moment with me for 10 minutes or so. And he'll take any question. And yeah, the appearance at St. Sabina was not entirely coherent, but you know, he came across as a three-dimensional person with personality, opinions, willing to say things that might get him in trouble.
That Fred Rice wouldn't have said.
Yeah, we have not seen, to my memory, this kind of outspokenness in the police department for decades. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing, I don't know. But he is. Yeah, I think your phrase earlier, Ken, was he comes across as a three-dimensional guy.
Well, it's interesting because these are all the characters that Rahm Emanuel is bringing around him, and we now, you know, 2 months into the Emanuel administration, we're really beginning to see this guy in the three dimensions. And I was fascinated by this thing, you know, with your paper has today the work rule changes that he wants to bring about. There are a couple of things. I mean, who knew that city workers got time and a half for prepping their vehicle in the morning, right? So my sense of this is that he's doing an exceptionally good job of sort of rolling these little things out one at a time. He's not going all Wisconsin on us and you know, just attacking the government workers. He's just kind of saying, look, you know, these guys don't get double time for work, and they get time and a half. Maybe we should have that for the city workers. I mean, do you get a sense that he's very clever in the way he's letting this stuff happen?
Well, as a union member myself, in a declining industry, the newspaper business, I've seen our work rules be changed and cut back. And every time they've done it, they've tried to make it as painless as possible. And the union has generally gone along with it. Why? Because we know there's not any more money, there's not enough money to keep the old standards going. So we have to accept less, and we have to work with our employer to try and accept less and still keep going. And I think it's always easy to pick around at the fringes. As long as you're not dealing with some of the major things, like the amount of money you make or health benefits, there's room for negotiation. And I think the mayor understands this, and I think the unions will eventually go along.
It's very interesting. And also, if it gets rid of the furlough days, I think that's something that everybody hates, the public and everybody else. Well, once again, we've blown off 28.5 minutes here. It's that's it. We've run out of time, flat out of time. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV, and of course you can find us right here on CAN TV, but you can also see this and other programs online at cantv.blip.tv. You can check us out there. You can subscribe via iTunes, and of course, soon you can come and no, never mind. We're not going to do the gun range thing. Charlie Meyerson, independent journalist, joining us today. Art Golab, Chicago Sun-Times, Ethan Michaeli, Residents Journal, and We the People Media. Excellent conversation. Thanks so much for being here, guys. We'll see you all next time on Chicago Newsroom. Thanks for watching.